if you have in an organization a lot of tasks that are highly repetitive and fairly low as far as the skill required to execute them, there may be an excellent opportunity to offload that to a robot.
Welcome back to another installment of the NextGen case study series. On this episode today, we have Gary Melling, who is the president and CEO of Acquired Insights, Inc., which is a company specializing in AI and big data solutions, as well as digital transformation strategies. With over 40 years of experience in management consulting and systems integration, Gary has worked across various industries, including military, R&D, and Silicon Valley startups, navigating through significant technological and economic shifts in his experience, which is why we're happy to have him on the show today. Gary, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Devon. A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for your service, by the way, with what you've dedicated to the military and all that work that you've kind of gone through. And I'm really curious actually to start with, if you wouldn't mind sharing just a quick little background on, who you are, where you came from, and how you landed as the CEO of Acquired Insights.
Sure, I'll try to make this brief. Basically, I started off. I went to university, did an undergrad, and it was really not very useful to me in anything. It was in sociology, and then I later on went on to study some other things. But I got to a point in my life where I knew technology was taking over the world, and I decided what I would do is, at that time, focus on hardware. So I went to DeVry Institute of Technology, and I had an absolutely amazing time there. For me, it was kind of a rite of passage as a young man. I had done that in other things. I'd been in the Merchant Marine and so on, but this was a rite of passage with respect to having a repertoire of knowledge and school and skills and tools that you can take to the marketplace where you've got real commercial value. And so I thought that was an interesting way to create a bit of a pivot in my career at that time. I worked in hardware. I worked in marine seismics and geophysics in the Arctic, the North Atlantic. I did a lot of work overseas. Mostly working for oil companies, shooting underwater profiles of the bottom of the ocean to help them understand where they should be either drilling or putting anchors for wells or a variety of other things. So that captured the interest of the Navy, and I developed a prototype of a Helmholtz resonator, which was a kind of a theoretical thing only. Nobody had really built one. But nobody told our team that no one had ever built one, so we didn't know that we couldn't do it. So we went ahead and did it anyway. And the Navy caught some interest. General Dynamics flew up from the States, so we got a lot of attention. At that time, the Navy was in a position where it was purchasing 12 new frigate ships, and they needed someone to come in and help create the training for moving from the old tube 280 class destroyers into the modern solid state, phalanx weaponry systems and so on. So I was brought on board to basically create the curriculum and build all the labs and do all that kind of stuff, which was a wonderful, wonderful experience. At that point, I decided to go back to university. So I did an MA in educational psychology, but for most people, that's statistics and measurement and evaluation. And then worked with Atomic Energy in Canada for a couple of years doing global training. And then I became more of a freelance consultant. And from there, from 1992, I've just been involved basically in a series of entrepreneurial things with an exception of two posts, one at Accenture and one at Computer Sciences Corporation, which were also wonderful in their own right, but for other things as well. So that's a little bit about me.
The first thing I picked up on was the fact that you went to DeVry, and
Okay.
that's actually where my dad went to school as well for computer engineering.
Uh-huh.
And he too now is a serial entrepreneur. So I wonder what they have in terms of influence in the way of creating opportunities. Because it seems to me like you just really have a keen eye and a dedication to looking for problems to solve and then diving headfirst into solving those problems.
Well, thank you. That's one of the things I like to do. I'm constantly looking to work with people who are curious.
Hmm.
For me, if someone's smart, that's great. But if they're not curious, it's kind of a wasted reserve. It's a wasted talent. So curiosity to me is really, really important. And whether I'm interviewing someone or just having a chat with them about technology or whatever it is, I find that the people who are curious, almost insanely curious about something, will often uncover some really interesting things that no one else had ever really discovered. And primarily because, again, they didn't know that they weren't supposed to ask that question, or they, just fumbled ahead and did what they were going to do anyway, and some new information became apparent. Being in a situation where you have lots of questions, you're curious, and basically you're tenacious, means that sooner or later you'll get that answer. And someone will say to me, for example, in the company, when someone says to me, well, what are we going to do about that? Or what are we going to do about this? And I'll just simply say, I don't know yet. I haven't figured it out yet, but I will, but I haven't figured it out yet. So, but that's why we also work great with teams, because when you've got more people working together, you've got obviously inputs from a variety of different sources, and that always makes a solution that much faster.
Yeah, I get a sense that you are very prone to collaboration. Like I think that
That's
that's a part of the framework of the idea of being curious is one thing, but to take that and then collaborate with through your curiosity with others to create solutions to problems is really powerful and something that, as you mentioned, it's kind of a very important skill to develop for anybody who's looking to navigate the landscape of entrepreneurialism. When it comes to, some of the day-to-day stuff that you do, how does that all kind of tie in? What do you get up to as the CEO?
Oh, I'm first of all, I have a partner, Tracy Fieber. So we've co-founded Acquired Insights. Tracy is an amazing person, a wonderful resource in so many different ways. And so together, what we do is we typically, when we have a new challenge or a new opportunity, whatever it is, we basically sit down and figure out who's going to take sort of which end of the stick. Because think of a stick, two people carry it. So we're going to put our heads together and come up with a solution that we think is going to be the optimum solution. But we always say no pride of ownership. It's not about ego. It's not about who came up with the solution. We
Hmm.
want the solution to come from our brand, not from a specific person, if you will. So we do a lot of discussing about opportunities and taking a look at accounts and how we're going to penetrate one account or what we're going to do with a new partnership. Or there's no opportunity to get bored in this role.
You reminded me of a saying that I'm quite fond of, and that is not to be in pursuit of being right, but in pursuit of finding right. And that idea
Mm.
of it's nobody really necessarily needs to take credit for anything specifically. We're all working together towards some common goal. And so I love that that's kind of a part of the framework that you do. How do you attribute some of your early experiences in the various industries that you were in to some of the work that you're doing now? How did that kind of shape the way that you approach running Acquired Insights?
Well, I would like to say that early in my career, everything was well thought out and planned, but that would be the antithesis of what really happened. I just kind of fumbled and stumbled around and found my way. But what to answer your question more specifically, uh, for me, what I think were the seminal moments over the last, say, 40 years. I can identify them and tie them to specific people that I've met on my journey.
Mm,
I have one. I'll just give you one quick example. I had a gentleman. It was my first day at Computer Sciences Corporation. I was flown down to Atlanta to have a meeting, and they had hired two other people, the same, and we were all meeting for the first time in this location in Atlanta. And they brought some other seasoned team members, and this was kind of a kickoff to get us all to work together. And the gentleman beside me, they called bell for lunch, and everybody left, and he and I stayed. And he had been with KPMG, I'd been with Accenture, and we started exchanging some war stories. Well, we became instant friends, and I would say over a very short period of time, Lear was the brother that I didn't have.
mm,
And so that closeness and, his background in economics, macroeconomics, he had a PhD in macroeconomics. Unfortunately, he passed a few years ago. But he was brilliant in being able to take a look at large, complex systems from a financial perspective. What I brought to the table was a similar perspective, but not from the finance so much, but from managing human resources, from an organizational effectiveness perspective, from an employee perspective, from a customer perspective. What do you do with your employees? In fact, I was tapped by the U.S. Army to contribute several months of work on designing the soldier of the future. So that wasn't, we're not talking about their uniform, their equipment, bullets, guns. This is the person that's inside the uniform.
Right.
So you take a look at that individual from many different perspectives. And in the process of reviewing the perspectives, you have to use a fair bit of science and statistics and analysis and so on, competencies and measurements, proficiency levels, and so on. So those are the kinds of things that I love to get involved in. And in the process of doing what I love to do, I've had this amazing good luck at meeting incredible people along the way. And if there's someone that I want to meet, I'll give you a quick example. David Hansen from Hansen Robotics, Sophia, the robot. I was wanting to have a call with David and didn't know him, didn't know anyone that knew him. But I went through my network and I started digging a little bit, and I eventually found someone that actually knew him very, very well and set up a call for us. And he was actually going through a Target store in the States with a shopping cart to buy new clothes for Sophia while we were talking and negotiating a deal to enable us to acquire the rights to work with Hansen Robotics in healthcare in North America. So again, often it's serendipity. I'll try to get something going. I believe, in addition to curiosity, one of the things that's very important, especially as an entrepreneur, especially if you're younger, it's very difficult. You can't, by just nature, you can't have the experience. You don't get 40 years of worth of experience when you're at a school. You've
Right.
got to, spend the time to develop that experience. But in the process of developing that experience, I believe you can accelerate your credibility and do it honestly by what I call credibility through association. So the fact that in the example I gave you just a minute ago about David Hansen, and by the way, David was fabulous. He was wonderful, very engaging and gracious. And we did the same thing with Ben Gertzel. But the process that we go through in creating credibility through association is an honorable process. You can't do it unless you've got a good pedigree of work behind you, unless the person you're wanting to be associated with will let you associate yourself with them. I mean, there's a lot of, professional things you have to do to make it work. But if you're focused on that, then you're in a position as an entrepreneur where you can go from an unknown, relatively unknown, to someone who, you post a LinkedIn article and you've got a photo up, a photo up with either David or Ben or somebody, and you're, discussing and negotiating legal rights to different services and so on. That wouldn't be possible if I wasn't curious and if I didn't have a bias for action. So it would be easy to say, well, gee, it would be nice if someone could introduce us. It's different to say, I'm going to find someone who's going to introduce us, and it's going to be the right person. So a lot of times, when people look at what we've accomplished, and Tracy's very resourceful as well, when people look at what we've accomplished and they think we have this massive team, and they realize there's really only about a dozen of us. We have, technical people that we work with and teams that we bring in and swap them in and swap them out and do all that kind of stuff. But in the customer facing and the negotiation and the contract writing and everything that we're doing, we absolutely have a very small core group of people that really know each other very well. I'm very fortunate to be in the position so that when I say to someone on our team, Jim, Rick, anybody on the team, I have an ask, this is what I need. I know that when I get that deliverable, it's going to be top quality. And that's very hard these days. Consistency and quality is very difficult to observe. And the other thing I think probably in the marketplace, which is a link to marketing, to sales, to customer satisfaction, to everything, is truth. truth is the most expensive and valuable asset in the world right now. People are clamoring for the truth. And we get a lot of, whether it's in business, technology, social activities, it doesn't matter what it is, we have become so accustomed to hearing a watered down version of the truth, or a half truth, or part of the truth. Or, I'll give you a quick example. One of the products that we're it's an app that we're going full court press on in North America, and we've negotiated exclusive rights for Canada, and then we have non-exclusive rights for the States. It's a product put out by a company in Germany called Westrax, and they're SAP partners. What they've done is developed an app that allows an organization to go into their SAP ERP system, and basically within one day, they'll know everything that's in that system. The challenge that most SAP, and I'm not picking on SAP, whether it's SAP, Oracle, you can stick to any ERP system. They've created their legacy out of coming into organizations initially and doing process redesign and then on-prem installations. And the technology has advanced so much. Everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people are very familiar with ChatGPT, or they're using a variation of it, or they're using it to write papers, or they're doing something, even if it's looking for recipes. So ChatGPT has really given a kickstart to how a lot of people who were otherwise not technology savvy to at least being enticed and seduced to wanting to try the technology, and then being pleasantly surprised about the results. And then with a little bit of refining on your questions and so on, you can actually come up with some pretty interesting stuff. And now, of course, they've got videos and video generators and picture generators and all kinds of things. When you have access to that technology and you take a look at the implications of applying that technology in modern business or in modern society, the challenge is not, can the technology do it? The challenge really, more often than not, is how capable, how able are the people that you're going to introduce this technology to going to be able to use it? How receptive are they? How warm? If they receive it but they don't like it, that's not going to help. So there's, in management consulting, we talk about organizational change management, which is different than change management within a technology scenario. A pure technology scenario, change management, I need some code changed. I write up a code, a change application, and the code gets changed. It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's basically what it is. The organizational change management, on the other hand, is how do all of the people and all of the roles in the organization, what do they need to know? When do they need to know it? And how can they best be prepared so when the switch is flipped, whether it's a multiple phased-in rollout or a big bang, whenever that launch switch gets tripped and now everything is going live, you want people to be in the know from before the engagement, during the engagement, and after the engagement, post-implementation support, for example. So OCM is a huge, huge piece of this. But you can build the curiosity, you can build the management of people, you can take a look at any of the points that I've made, and when you apply them in a scenario where people are working for a common cause and they believe that it has some esoteric, some existential value, you can really get a lot out of people. And I say that in an affectionate way. I'm not in a predatory way. Mm-hmm. There are lots of folks that again, they're very smart, but they don't know how to capitalize, apply their knowledge. And one of the things that I like to do is when I hear a problem, I like to hear a lot of different perspectives before I start to wade in on the problem. But once I'm wading in on it, usually a solution actually gets synthesized very quickly. And part of that is simply because I've got the amount of experience that I have. I mean, back in '83, I was designing printed circuit boards for technology that was put on U.S. Air Force jets that were flying over Moscow, and we could read Pravda over the shoulder of somebody on the street. Today, I guess we call that Google Earth or something like it.
Yeah.
But that's what we were doing in '83.
The technology's come quite a long way, and our ability or willingness to participate in its evolution is really quite clear in how the consumers are voting with their dollars, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
And
sir.
I'm guilty of this myself because when ChatGPT first came out and they had the free version, I'm happy to say that I was one of the first million accounts there. I
Uh-huh.
don't know how fast they got the other 999,999 people, but it was very quickly, and I was one of them. And I'm now also one of the ones that are paying not just for the next step up, but for the enterprise version for um different tools and things that I create for my clients myself. So there is there's definitely an influence of the consumer. There's an influence of the technology as it relates to the, governments using them, corporations using them, businesses using them, and the way that we are shaping them and evolving them is, I think, faster than we're all prepared to deal with. And I mean,
Mhm.
on that note, Gary, I'm curious to kind of learn how you guys at Acquired Insights are shaping your own customer experience and how you are implementing some of these new tools in, uh, you know, wherever they fit, because some people use them in the customer acquisition process for
Uh-huh.
creating, the generative stuff if you want to write a, really good email that's on point, or you want to do some research, or if you wanted to use maybe even AI voice to do calling and surveys and data collection, or there's just a million applications for this. I'm wondering, how are you getting creative with it, and how are you seeing it shape the way that you do business?
I love the question. And the reason for that is because um, you're right. It seems like there's 1,000 new apps every day.
Hmm.
And how you could possibly stay ahead of all of them or be on point with half of them, I have no idea. I mean, we're voracious readers and we try to stay, in touch with the bulk of the leading stuff, but nobody can do it all.
Hmm.
Um, so, as I think about, your question, we've in the past, we've tried a lot of different things. We've tried geofencing and, we've used it with customers, let's say in the UK and auto dealerships and things like that. Those kinds of things work very well, but you have to be very nimble and be able to deploy, let's say, a change in technology very quickly. Here's a quick example. So if you're using geofencing and you're picking up everybody's smartphone that walks within the capture range and you push them a message, what happens if there's a mandate where everyone has to stay home?
Mm.
It doesn't work that well.
Right.
So that I just provided that as a little bit of a lead up to you might be disappointed by what I tell you about what we do, because even given all of the technology we have access to, we're kind of old school. Um, and the reason for that is it's not that we're lazy. We found that the people that we want to access are like us in the sense that they don't have 8 hours a day just to see what new apps are out in AI.
Mm.
They've got a business to run, they've got a life to lead, they've usually got families, they've got a bunch of stuff going on. And so I have found, despite the fact that we've used all kinds of tools, even with using those new tools, well, geofencing isn't part of it, but if we're doing, let's say, an email marketing campaign or a text campaign or something like that, we honestly get, and I can prove it, we honestly get opens of 30% and above. We get 30% plus clicking on our links to our site, to the message that we're pushing them. And I think we do it because we take the time to slow it all down. And what I do is I typically write a draft of my message that I want to send out. I also create, I have another partner where we created a sentiment analysis app for the headlines and for the content. And why that's important is because if you take a look at most professional marketers, especially those that are writing the bylines and so on for all of the content, it's not uncommon for a professional marketer, content writer, to score between 20 and 40% on our sentiment analyzer. We've used it with a couple of people to test it. When we use it internally, we're getting in excess of 50%, 55, 56%. So you have to have something out of the gate that's compelling. A good subject line will do that. And if it's personalized with their name, even easier. The content can't be verbose. The content needs to be really more factual. I wrote an introductory email last week to a Canadian organization, and it was a warm introduction, basically 2 bullet points that describe the status quo, and then 5 bullets that describe what we do and why we're different. And then told them that, our product's in the SAP store, and gave them some credibility about, some references, endorsements, and links to other use cases and so on. But we find that, I know a lot of people say, well, if you write something that's too long, nobody's going to read it. I disagree. If you write garbage, people won't read it. But if you write something that is compelling and it's hitting their sweet spot and their numbers depend on it, they'll read it. So now that's not an excuse to have a run-on email. You want to still try to make it as short as possible. But it's not uncommon for me to write like a page and a half, and people are saying, oh no, just write, 3 bullets and that's it. You want to pique their interest. If I'm going to be interrupting a C-level executive in a Fortune 2000 company, and I only send him a couple of bullets, or her a couple of bullets, it's going to go nowhere. First of all, the correspondence has probably been read by their executive assistant to be screened before they see it. Right? So I've got to have enough content in there, and usually I put something in there, a bit of a honeypot for the administrator, for the executive assistant too. And I'll say, if you prefer, I can work through your executive assistant. So I don't know them by name, but I mention them by position. There are a lot of little things you need to do, because people, we all want the same thing. We want it to be treated fairly. It's really just the golden rule. Treat others how you'd like to be treated. And so professional courtesies and those kinds of things are important to us. We take the time to go through the sentiment analysis. We take all of our messages and we run them through our own spam filters. We want to see what's going to happen. We can, do whatever character changes we need to. Anything that we can do, it's really old school, and it's just paying attention to the details. If you go very fast and you have a lot of really slick technology, I can't tell you how many people are using this stuff, but I get, dear insert name here. It's not helping me. Like, I get that far and I'm not interested in the rest, and I don't think I'm alone. So truth is important. You have to be able to back up what you're saying with hardcore facts. And you can't do it in one initial email, but you can allude to it by, let's say reference, endorsement, and so on. But those are the underpinnings of what we do. And we've tried so many different things. And they all, depending on who the audience is and what industry they're in and where they are in their business development, there are times where some of these other tools will catch and light on fire, and, we'll have something good happen. But most of the time, I think for me at least, I like to go back to the basics. I've found that no matter what I've tried, and they're all, sexy tools that can do all kinds of things, pretty much shave and pour you a drink. But in the end, what am I walking away with? What do I know that's different? What can I do with this information? And I can tell you that there's a lot of fluff and conversations happening out in business that are really activity traps. There's no content in them. They're not driving anyone to do anything different. They're not validating anything. And meetings are just a huge activity trap. So what we try to do is, if we have meetings, we make them deliberately no more than half an hour, and sometimes only 15 minutes, because we're coming to the meeting prepared. As far as our correspondence goes with partners and the marketing, again, we have a lot of different tools, but what seems to have worked best for us is just old school.
When it comes to the unwritten rule, because from one guy that does marketing to another, I've watched the pervasive exploitation of this idea that if we write really good things or we create really good things and put that out in the world, then people aren't going to mind if you also attach a message to it that inspires them to take some kind of action, to purchase something. Um, Commercials used to be very informative and entertaining and provided value, but now they are just belligerent and constantly in your face, and um they don't respect that unwritten rule of providing something that's useful. So what you're kind of tapping into with the way that, or with your approach, is that there's this authenticity to it. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, there's not really a way for it to be authentic, because all it is is a predictive model that's guessing what the next most logical word is going to be in a sentence. And so it creates this disconnect between the people that you're trying to connect with. And like, as a company that focuses on providing AI solutions, that's one of the things that we have really tried to mitigate, is this idea that, oh, AI is just a robot and all it's going to do is, bleep blorp its way through the company.
Uh-huh.
But um, there's so much more in terms of sophistication and the opportunity to create conversations. And I wonder, i- when it comes to having those conversations, what sorts of bottlenecks or challenges exist around maintaining that authenticity, but then also, aiming at growth and scaling operations and taking on new clients? Like, does it limit your ability to prospect at a comfortable pace? Does it make it easier? How do you kind of see that in terms of, you know, efficiency to grow a business?
Well, I was interested in the way you set the question up, um, because the question, as I took it, was really talking about the tools and how do we use the tools and so on to when we encounter those kinds of situations to work around them. I'd like to maybe put the shoe on it the other foot, and I'd like to say that um, when we work with organizations, what they're really buying is us, our knowledge, our relationships, our networks, our technical savvy. Um, and so what we try to do is, I always try to begin a new relationship with a new customer by receiving a problem statement.
Mhm.
If they're trying to solve a problem, let's understand what language do they use to frame their problem. Is the problem a problem, or is the problem a symptom? So it gives us an opportunity to engage them and really help them ferret out what it is they're wanting to put in a concise document, in a problem statement. And I have to usually remind them, don't try to create a solution for the problem statement. Just clearly articulate the problem. Because a lot of people want to give you the solution at the same time. Here's a problem, here's a solution.
Right.
But if they're going to do that, then they don't need us.
Mm.
Right? Like my wife and I went to a bike store recently, and she wanted to get some adjustments made to her bike, and she was trying to tell the mechanic, do this, do that. And he said, listen, lady, you know what? Just tell me what's uncomfortable, and I'll adjust the bike so you're comfortable on it. Right? So he wasn't interested really in hearing from her what changes to the bike that she wanted to make, because she really didn't understand the bike. She didn't understand, which nuts you change and adjust and move and so on. So I think a lot of times in business, clients initially start the relationship being quite conservative, meaning that they create a solution, but the solution has caveats. Well, if we do this, then we can do that. Or if we do that, then we can do this. And I'm forget all that. Focus on the solution. Don't make it dependent on anything. What is the solution? And if we can start with a clean piece of paper like that, then we can get into other questions that are supportive to create context values reasoning. We're trying to understand, their language, how they compose things, how they view things. And it sounds like it might take a lot of time, seconds. It's not a long, massive, checklist or anything. It's just something we've acquired by doing it for so many years.
So then how do you choose which tools to use to make that part of the work that you do genuine and authentic and also efficient in the way that you are able to serve the people that you're serving?
Excellent question. The first thing, and maybe this is because my background is in measurement and evaluation, statistics, and so on, but we always go in, once we've created enough trust with the customer to be able to have the beginning of a working relationship, we like to come in and have some dialogue with them, with their organization, and we'll do some interviews if we can. They don't have to be in person. They can be like this or over the phone or whatever. A lot of times, as far as trying to do workarounds or to match a set of solutions, in particular apps, to a customer's need, the assessment is often mind blowing for them. And I'm not overselling that. What I'm saying is that picture yourself as a CIO in an organization that's been around for 100 years. They brought SAP into their organization 30 years ago, and you've just been hired to take over the position of CIO. You don't know about their documentation. You don't know how complete it is. You know it's going to be missing things. You know it's going to be wrong in some places. The people that wrote those documents have long since gone. They're either employees or contractors or consultants. They're gone. So you really don't have a viable way to understand what's under the hood quickly. There are ways to do an assessment, but it typically takes anywhere from 6 months to a year. It can take longer. It typically costs anywhere from $500,000 to about $7 million in a 2-year stint to go through an as-is assessment of an SAP system. These are very complex systems.
Mm-hmm.
So in the process of getting ready to do all that, you have to obviously help clients understand the process of what you're going to go through. But we've already mapped out, we know that depending on, let's say the customer has a particular architecture of SAP, we have so many different architectures on one side of the page, and we take a look at the path they need to go through based on their vision of where they want to go. And we've already mapped not only the apps, but the vendors that support those apps. So for us, it's a plug and play. It was a kind of a stroke of genius, thanks to Rick on our team. One of the things we did is created this process. So now we get a call from not a customer, but an inquiry, and they say, this is our system, and we're thinking about going to S/4HANA. Well, with a few questions, we can ask them what we need to know to do a 1-day roundtable workshop. It's done virtually. And we can accomplish in 2 years what other organizations are doing. We can accomplish it in 1 day. That's the power of the app. And it's a fraction of the cost. And if they license the app, we credit them back the assessment. So what we've done is we've torn down the barriers. If someone has an I don't know if I want to commit to the licensing because I haven't seen the data. Well, we'll show you the data before you license it. Whatever the customer has wanted that doesn't affect our commercial viability, whatever they've wanted to see, we have bent over backwards to create that for them. And now we have enough of those instances where, let's say, for example, because of all of this incredible work that was done, so we did it initially for the railroad industry, and now we get an inquiry from the trucking industry. We can basically use 90% of that information from the first presentation, port it over and customize it, but now make it industry specific and customer specific according to benchmarks we can obtain online, which show them how they perform relative to their industry. And as far as their benchmarks go, we ask them, what benchmarks are you keeping? Are there things that we can, are we looking at the same thing? Probably not, because what we look at, we can, in our 1-day assessment, we can pick up 800,000 T codes that, they knew about, but they didn't know how to prioritize them. They didn't know which ones needed to be thrown out. They didn't know which ones the last time maybe it was used was 1997, but they're still paying, support to maintain and service that app. So there are things that can be done, but I go back to curiosity and honesty.
Yeah, that the being curious allowed you to shape the way that you serve, and then the fact that you're so willing to go above and beyond in creating what it is that the client needs to see to make a decision seemingly has streamlined that process of uh, helping them make their decision whether or not you're a good fit.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's a great way to look at it. And what we've done, I don't want to make it sound like it just took a day to prepare, the materials. This is years of work, right?
Right.
Years of work to prepare, to know where to get information, to know which repositories, where the data sources are that you need. And you can only do that if you're curious initially to go out and find all those things, which will then feed the model you're going to use to connect with the customer.
And that's, I guess, the benefit of having such a dialed in process and a service to be able to, especially over all of that time, to be able to just be so efficient in terms of how you communicate, how you bring this idea to them, how you present it. Very, very, very insightful. So when it comes to, what's on the horizon for the work that you're doing, what are you excited about? What's coming down the pipeline? Where are you kind of aiming at with things?
Oh, wow. Well, the mainstay of what we'll do for the next 2 years for sure will be our focus on this SAP app. Um, there are 400,000 customers of SAP. 45% of SAP's revenue comes from North America. So I think we'll have to, work quite a while to get all of that business on board. But it's a huge, massive opportunity. Parallel to that, we're also involved in robotic process automation. So for those that don't know, if you have in an organization a lot of tasks that are highly repetitive and fairly low as far as the skill required to execute them, there may be an excellent opportunity to offload that to a robot. And I don't mean a physical robot. It's a
Right.
software robot. So you don't see them, you can't touch them or anything. But that bot will, because it's not taking smoke breaks, it's obviously doesn't need vacation, it's working 24/7, 365. If you take into account, and don't believe me, please go to Google and look this up, do a bit of research, because what they'll say is that if you take a look at the average employee in an average organization in North America, the average employee works about 2 hours and 13 minutes a day
Holy
of
cow.
actual productive work that they're being paid to do. The rest of the stuff, they could be noodling, looking real estate, surfing, social media, who knows what they're doing. Could be in meetings that are non-productive, don't know. But that number, 2 hours, let's call it 3 hours and be really generous. So a bot's going to be 8 times more productive in a day because they're working 24 hours and they're going to get everything right every time. There's no breaks. So we're finding that both in the corporate sector, and I still keep in touch and do work with governments with respect to military. So
Mhm.
that's some of the areas that we're working in, and we see a bit of an uptick in that work in the near future as well.
The productivity thing just struck me. I feel guilty when I have to go and eat lunch, let alone be unproductive for more than 15 minutes in any given period of time. So that is such an alarming statistic. But then when you really start to do the math on that across however many employees are in your thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
when it is mundane, simple, repetitive tasks, if there's a bot or a program that you can create that solves that problem or addresses that problem, uh, the exponential gains that that company could experience speak for themselves. And I guess that kind of makes it almost, as Alex Hormozy would put it, a deal so good you'd be stupid to say no to it.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's really powerful, Gary, in terms of how you solidify your place in the industry and continue to grow. So when it comes to creating these types of solutions, do you find that you're ever in a situation where there's uh, you don't know what you don't know, so you're like faced with the task of creating a solution that you don't necessarily currently have, but it's because somebody has made an unusual request. Have you ever kind of had to navigate that before?
Yes, we've had a couple situations, whether it's creating content that they needed us to train people on that
Mhm.
didn't exist, and I've on a different note, very very different note. For example, actually, you know what? I'm not gonna go with that example, and I know you're gonna edit this out and so on.
Sure.
It was an example of when I used to work a very long time ago. Um, as a psychotherapist. And one of the things that I did back in the 90s is I'd worked at an alternative healthcare clinic where I had a chance to meet a lot of really interesting people that some were a bit woo woo and out there and so on. And that's great. That's fine. There's a place for everybody at the table. But when you take a look at how people work, what motivates them, it's amazing to me in the end how we really are all after the same thing. We want to be happy. We want to have a full belly. We want a roof over our head. We want to be loved. We want to love somebody. We want to have, if we've got a family, we want our children to be safe and taken care of. These are just universal things. And I find it's interesting to me when I go to meetings. I generally, as a rule, I don't normally talk for the first half hour in a meeting. It's
Hmm.
just I've learned keep your mouth shut and your ears open, figure out who's in the room, what the political affiliations are, who's going to hang out who to dry, like those politics, that will get you further than understanding a schematic for a server.
Right.
Um, so it's all about people and people. There's so many that are walking wounded for many, many different reasons, childhood, adults, financial situations, illnesses, war, famine. I mean, there's no shortage of things to undermine our ability to get up every morning and put on a good fight for the day. There's no shortage of that. So we have to find a way, and in order to do that, again, I just think truth and kindness. Um, I've spoken to, in fact, last week we had someone after we had an initial call with them and they found out what we do and how we do it. Um, there's a saying in technology, a brownfield operation, and a brownfield operation is different from a greenfield. A greenfield is a brand new opportunity. You've got carte blanche, white piece of paper. You can basically do what you want. There's brownfields and bluefields and all kind, but brownfield is when the client has their own configuration of hardware and software and everything. And what you're going to try to help them do is upgrade it, transition it, improve it, enhance it, inject a variety of new technologies and innovation, etc. Um, but a lot of people, go in those conversations right into the technology, and they don't take a moment. You know, Hi, Devon, how are you?
Right.
What'd you do this morning? You know, and if they just took that, those connections with people are so important. They don't need to be long or complicated, but they're important. And they're important not only at the moment, but they set the benchmark for how those people will look at you going forward. So I'm an introvert, actually. I'm a hardcore introvert. If you take a look at Myers-Briggs or any of the assessment indicators, you can't get any more introverted than me. But if you're talking to me about something that I know and like and understand, I'll give you my complete, unload of everything I know. So it's just, people are all very different, and you never know what somebody went through the hour before you have a call with them.
Right.
So let's just try to be kind. We can still be honest. We can still move business at the speed of light. There's no reason why we can't, but it can be done differently. It can be done with a sense of compassion. Urgency, yes. There's a lot of money being made and lost while people are waiting to make decisions. Some people have a hard time making decisions. Some people are fearful of their job if they make the wrong decision. What we try to do is help them understand that you're dealing with a team, and if I don't know, if my team doesn't know, we have this team here. And, we can point to the IBMs and the PwCs of the world because we have active partnerships with them. So I think that as we trying to help a prospect understand that you're going to be honest with them, and that could be a good thing. It might not be a good thing, depending on what you find, right? But you're going to be honest with them. You're going to give them a candid perspective of what environment their SAP system is in, or what it looks like, how it's performing, etc. We're going to do it. We don't do any of the consulting work after the assessment, so we're not trying to use one to bait the other. It's a very clean play for us. We just do the assessment. And we're going to tell you everything that you need to know, probably more than you need to know, want to know about your system, because the artificial intelligence with the app just produces so much rich content. And what that content does is it informs the CIO of the customer organization how they can improve their strategy about what they were going to do. Now their new choices, new things they can do that they were unaware of. So it informs their strategy. And for the CFO, one of the reasons why most of these projects are over time and over budget is because they didn't do a good assessment. So they don't know how to calculate what all of this is going to cost. And when you have, for example, an ERP implementation that costs $400 or $500 million over 4 or 5 years, rounding errors add up. They're big. So it's important, like I say, to take the time up front. If you take the time up front to, whether it's preparing a pitch or whatever it is, having all these resources available, then when you need them in the future, you've got these repositories. You can just go back and cherry pick what you need. Obviously customize it a little bit, but I think that's what everybody basically in management consulting and IT consulting is doing. And why? It makes sense. It's not just a lazy way. If you capture the right information, it's rich content for your customer.
Yeah. Gary, it's been a very eye-opening experience kind of hearing you explore all of these ideas and sharing some of your wisdom and insight. You've been very generous, and I'm very grateful for that. We're kind of coming to the end of our time together here, and I'd like to kind of close this out on a high note here, if I could. If there was somebody that was in a similar position to you, facing challenges as it relates to kind of growing their business and finding solutions to their challenges, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say be intensely curious, but don't make curiosity your goal.
There's a lot to unpack in that one. Just in my head, I was like, okay, yeah, curiosity is really important, but then also you could get stuck just being curious, just learning, just looking, and never take any action. So that's very,
right.
very sound advice. And I'm sure there's a lot more there too, if you really dig into it. Thank you for this, Gary. It's been an absolute pleasure. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further, or perhaps work with you, how would one go about doing that?
Oh, great. We have a couple of contact points. We can be reached at 1-800-627-4151. We can also be reached at info@aiinc.cloud. So either one of those two will get us, either Tracy or I, our attention. And we look forward and welcome anyone who has questions or they'd like to have a chat about what they're working on, and maybe there's some cross-pollination there. Who knows?
Wonderful. We'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes. And if you are looking to get in touch with me and my team for any reason, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode, and I will see you in the next.